So I've got the piece I was working on in the last episode painted black now, and I mounted the capacitive discharge ignition and the transmission controller on that plate. Now I'm going to mount it in my car, and then I can start cleaning up some of these messy wires under here. I have Matlock nuts that will hold this on. That way I won't have to worry about them coming loose. Oops, there goes my wrench. There were a pair of pliers I just noticed. I've been hunting for those pliers. It is such a close fit. Having trouble getting the nut on the stud I put in. Unfortunately, I did get that in there a little crooked, so it's not the best situation. On there yesterday, so I know it'll go. I actually tested it with the 3 Matlock nuts that I'm putting on today, so I know it goes. Fortunate that once you get stuff in there, your access is limited. So you got to work with what you got. Try a different nut on there. Sometimes one's a little cleaner than the other and it'll work a little better. If I get the one on the difficult to reach stud, it'll be easier to work on the other one. It's a little easier to reach. Hot muggy day today. And my glasses are fogging up. There we go. was the nut at all. I think it was just the angle I was having to work at it. Yep. So I get a wrench in my socket and tighten those up. Then I can start running some of the wires a little bit. So now that I've got that installed, I decided it was time to start finding the cables I need to connect and where they need to go. So I knew that there's connectors on there for the transmission, the main connector. And then there's a transmission output speed sensor and a transmission input speed sensor. And so I decided it'd be a good idea to find out where on the transmission those things are. And so that I know how far back to run this harness. So I go over to the transmission and I can see this connector. I can see the transmission outputs selector sensor, I'm sorry. I cannot see the transmission input speed sensor now. It may be on the opposite side of the transmission from how I have it on the bench. Maybe that's why I can't see it. But something tells me because they have this zip tied to the harness, it may not be used in all cases. So I go to the instructions to see if I can find where that is on the transmission, and I didn't find it. But what I did find was that in order to register this controller, they want you to scan a code on the back of it. Now, I have to take that back off just so that I can use my smartphone, which is the only way they give you to register this controller. I'm sure I read that in the past, but it's been months and I forgot that I had to do that. Well, I didn't forget that I had to run it through the smartphone and set it up through the smartphone with an app. What I did forget is that in order to do that, I need to scan that code on the back of the controller, which I now have mounted in the cars, but at least I have it, where I can get to it pretty easily, and I can take it off without the engine and everything else and all the cables connected, etc. So I am gonna go do that now, and because they're calling for storms this afternoon and I don't want to have to walk 100 yards back to the house in a lightning storm, that may be all I get done today. So I downloaded the app, and this is the code they want you to download. I could not scan it with my phone. Their app doesn't seem to work. Fortunately, I was able to enter the number that's printed below it, and it appears to have registered it. So I removed that, got the code, tried to scan the thing and couldn't get it to scan. Basically,
I took it off twice because I had put it back on after I had registered it manually by typing in the serial number. And I thought, hey, before I put this in, maybe it'd be a good idea to write down the serial number so that if their registration didn't work or got lost or something, I won't have to pull this off again. So for the second time today, I'm going to mount this under the fender, and by the time I get it mounted, it's probably time for me to get up to the house because rain's supposed to come between 3 and 4 and it's already 2:30. Okay. Decided to try to do some of this today. Okay, there's the transfer case wire that is coming out of the harness for the transmission output speed sensor. And I'm just going to tape that to that harness that the output speed sensor is on. Just so it's not dangling loose. It'll give the harness a little more protection if I run an extra layer of tape over it. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to leave the tag that says transfer case on. Who knows, maybe sometime in the future if this car gets totaled or something and someone pulls the transmission out, they may want it. So I'm not going to destroy anything that's not used. I'm going to tape it up. Okay, so now this thing, and I don't know about this transmission input speed sensor yet, but I have a plan for the other two that connect to the transmission. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take those, that harness, it's one harness most of the way, and I am going to run it alongside the battery cable. But I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to imagine, if you will, that this is the cable holder that's holding the battery cable. I'm just going to take another one of these and put it down there and run them like that, so that up until I branch off to the transmission, they'll just run parallel to each other. They should be out of the way because the battery cable's out of the way. I'm going to have to put the car on the lift up to do that. I may or may not show me doing that because it's really not that exciting. Maybe I'll just take the camera under and give you a look at what it looks like when it's finished. I've got the cable I need down there. So up goes the car. Okay, what you're looking at there is the battery cable, and as soon as I get under the lift, I'll actually point that out to you. Now, something was in the way. This is in the way, I guess. That's not part of the battery cable. This is the battery cable. Unfortunately, what they did is they put this clip with the eyelet up and the battery cable below it, and then these clips, the rest of the way back, have the eyelet below, or the bolt below and the eyelet above it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to have to cross these lines here to make it work, and there's a little bit of a bow in that line to begin with, so that's the ideal place to cross it. But I'm going to have to cross it here, and I think there will be plenty of space there. Now, first thing I need to do is make sure that this will go on there. It does. So I got to open it up, get the harness through it, and then close it back down. By the way, I took the nut off of this before I turned the video on, so if you're wondering why I didn't take the nut off, that's why. So okay, so now that wire's below, and I can take off the next clip, which I believe is a different size bolt, if I remember correctly. Yes, it's a 3/8, the first one is 7/16. According to my estimates from looking at the transmission and where those cables need to connect, we only need to go 2 clamps, and then the rest can connect to the it can connect to the transmission directly from there. So I want to keep this transmission input speed sensor out of this clamp because it may need to get used. If it does get used, what we'll do is basically there's zip ties on it. We'll clip those and it'll drop down to where it needs to be. Okay, so that's that. Like I said, if necessary to use this one, I'll just clip that zip tie, pull it down and plug it in. There's another zip tie here that could get clipped if necessary. I would suspect it doesn't have to. That should keep that nicely out of the way. It is a little bit loose in there, so I can pull it tight if I need to. and I can adjust it lengthwise if I need to. So I think that's going to work pretty good. So I pulled the tack wire out of that one harness because I didn't disconnect it, I just made it visible. The reason I did that is because most of that harness goes to connections that are inside the passenger compartment. And I wanted to leave the tack wire out in the engine bay. So I had it a little further, but I had to, so I pushed it back in to the harness. Now I'm just going to put a loop of tape so that it can't pull out of the harness from that point on. Now that I know where I want to have that come out of the harness, and make it much easier. I won't have to worry about that wire pulling out anymore. So just a couple loops of black tape around the harness to close up the slit, which they nicely left to use the harness material that leaves a nice slit if you need to do that. So now I have a tack wire here that goes to the transmission, the tack wire that goes to the actual tack, and they'll connect to a wire coming out of the sniper harness once I get that involved. I almost wish I had used a longer stud here, because I think this is going to be a good place for me to hang a couple wires. I do have one bigger clip, and I think I can fit two harnesses in that, and that'll hold them up out of the way. Between there and the connector to the transmission control module. And I think eventually I'm going to cut this grommet that was supposed to be for going through the firewall. I think I'm going to cut that off of the harness because it's not serving any purpose. All I'll do is see if I can get a nut on there and hold that up out of the way. I don't think those smaller harnesses will hold both of those and allow me to get the nut on it. It would have been nice if that were the case, but doesn't seem to be the case. One of the things I thought about doing, maybe I could do that if I'd actually take the nut off of that stud. Let me try fitting one of those on there. If I can get this around both of those, and get it connected on that stud. That would be nice. I might be able to do that if I take the nut off of here, put the clip on the stud, and then put the nut back on. I'm going to get the tools necessary to attempt that. Okay, so I am going to cut, actually I've cut it already, the little grommet off. And I'm going to try to take off that nut so that I can get, it's actually, I guess a hose or a wiring clamp on there. Let's see if I can take that off first. Taking this nut off and then putting it back on over the clamp actually gives me more room on the stud rather than trying to put another nut on the same stud that's already got a nut. So there was some black tape around here, and I slit this with a knife, so that will be going, and that will allow me to get the wires to lay closer to the panel here, more out of the way. I think I may need to take my pliers and bend that clamp. If you watched an earlier session where I was putting brake lines on, it seems as though if you, instead of trying to squeeze it here, squeeze it around the clamp part there, and it makes it easier. Well, that didn't line up very well, so I may have to try to squeeze it in this way to get those holes lined up. That's better. Now hopefully I can slip it over that stud and get a nut on it. Pretty tight. The problem is trying to hold that down at the same time that you're trying to put the nut on. Maybe what I'll end up doing is putting the nut in a socket, pressing down with the socket. And if I'm going to do that, the better kind of nut is a nut with a flange on it so that it won't pop into the socket. And I think I have one of those. To have the wrench set to tighten. And it helps to have that stud through the hole there. Can be something to push that on. I think if I can get it pushed on with maybe a large screwdriver, I think there'll be enough tension on it that it won't come off while I put a nut on it, and I may be able to use a normal nut.
It'd be easier if I'd just not be so stubborn and just use a bigger clamp. Problem is I only have one of those and I might need it somewhere else. Okay, that might have given me enough to catch a thread. Not quite. And I have to try the one with the flange. I'll be able to press on the wrench. I'm stubborn. I'm not going to give up on this because will be neater if I can just get that closed down a little bit more so that I can catch the stud. Well, by trying it this way, I know there's no way in the world that I was going to get it on. Over top of that without removing the nut off of the stud. Just wasn't going to happen. My stud's pushing into the firewall. That's not good. Try tightening that up again and see how far I can pull it out.
try the stud with the flange again. Shut the video off for a bit. I'm sure I'm going to struggle with this a little bit, but oh geez, I didn't even have it in the frame. So see if I can do this with using an extension, kind of like a handle, more or less like a screwdriver. So get that clip pushed down. Pull it out somewhere again. I'd be done if I'd used the bigger clamp. It's just not going to catch that stud. I think I'm going to have to go to the bigger clamp, and it'll fit on better. I should be able to line it up better. Won't be as tight. went on pretty easy with the bigger clamp. So there you have it. Sometimes your stubbornness doesn't pay off. So that's a pretty good fit up against the firewall. Next time. I guess the reason I was being so stubborn is I only have one of those, and it means an 8-mile trip to Home Depot to even get one, or 30-mile trip to Summit Racing, which might be more fun than Home Depot, but I will see where I go from here now.